The war had been going on for 11 of their years. 11 years, by the sacred star charts of the Vrothkai Dominion. That was barely the blink of a solar cycle, a rounding error, a footnote, the kind of number that junior commanders scribbled in margins before moving on to more important calculations. And yet, here I was, Supreme Field Commander Drevos Kaan, third son of the Vrothkai High Warlord, decorated survivor of 46 planetary campaigns, veteran of the Siege of Moldurath where 300,000 soldiers held a moon for 60 rotations without resupply. Here I was, sitting in a medical pod, dictating the most humiliating report of my military career to a recorder that I was fairly certain was judging me. Let me start from the beginning. Because this story, uncomfortable as it is, deserves to be told correctly. The planet designated Keth 4 in our tactical maps was what the humans called Earth, a completely unremarkable name, by the way. They named their homeworld after dirt, actual dirt. When intelligence officer Prixval first translated it for me, I laughed so hard my secondary breathing sac ruptured slightly. I considered this a sign of good fortune. I should not have laughed. I should not have considered anything about this campaign a sign of good fortune. Earth was the 16th human colony world we had attempted to pacify, and I say attempted with the full weight of retrospective embarrassment. The previous 15 had gone, less smoothly than our high command had projected. But we had learned, we adapted, we brought superior numbers, superior technology, and a battle plan so airtight that even my most pessimistic sub-commander, the eternally worried Feroz Baak, had called it probably fine. Feroz Baak, for reference, once described a completely sunny day as threatening. When Feroz Baak says something is probably fine, it means it is fine. Earth was not fine. The operation began on what the humans called a Tuesday. I will note for the record that humans have 7 named days, and somehow all of them sound like a minor insult in Vrothkai. Tuesday. Vrothkai translates this roughly as Day of the Disappointing Outcome. I genuinely wish someone had flagged this before we launched the invasion fleet. We descended through their atmosphere in standard assault formation. 1,500 dropships, 48 Vorthian ground crushers, 6 atmospheric suppression arrays. And me, personally, in command vessel Sovereign Reach, watching the blue-green world grow larger on my viewport and feeling rather good about myself. "Commander Drevos," said Feroz Baak, appearing at my side with that expression he wore when he wanted to say something alarming, but was calculating whether I would have him reassigned for it. "Our long-range sensors are picking up some unusual readings." "Unusual how?" "The humans are not evacuating." I turned to look at him. "What do you mean not evacuating?" "I mean," he said carefully, "that instead of running away they appear to be consolidating position." I waved this off with my primary claw. We had seen this before. Some species, when faced with overwhelming force, chose the dignity of a last stand over the indignity of fleeing. It was sad, really, brave, in a way that you could appreciate from a safe distance while also feeling relieved that the enemy was making your job easier. "They're being heroic," I told Feroz Baak. "It won't last." Feroz Baak made the sound he makes when he profoundly disagrees but has decided this particular battle is not worth fighting. I have heard that sound, I now realize, approximately 300 times. I have ignored it approximately 300 times. This is, upon reflection, a pattern I should have addressed earlier in my career. We made landfall at coordinates designated Point Velcor, which our cartography team had selected because it sat at the intersection of 3 major human population zones, had relatively flat terrain, and showed minimal defensive fortification on satellite imaging. What satellite imaging had not captured, because apparently no one thought to ask, was that the humans had spent the previous 6 months digging, not metaphorically, literally digging. They had burrowed into that flat terrain like the small furry creatures they apparently shared their evolutionary history with, creating a network of tunnels and underground positions that our ground crushers, frankly, were not designed to handle. This was, in the polite language of the official report I was required to file, an unanticipated environmental variable. In the impolite language I used when speaking to Feroz Baak privately, it was absolutely not what the briefing said, and I would very much like to speak to whoever wrote that briefing. The first 3 hours of the campaign proceeded according to expectation. Our dropships cleared ground, our suppression arrays disrupted their communication networks, our ground forces advanced. Human resistance was fierce, yes. Disorganized, yes. But fierce and disorganized in a way that felt manageable. Then they brought out what I can only describe, looking back, as the person responsible for ending my comfortable assumptions about this campaign. Her name, I would later learn from the prisoner database, was Mira Solano, Sergeant First Class, 31 standard years old by human reckoning, originally from a place called Caracas, which I understand is a city and not, as I initially assumed, some kind of honorific title. Height, 5 feet and 7 inches, which in Vrothkai measurement is what we would call not especially large. Build, what the humans apparently considered athletic. She had no powered armor, no exosuit amplification, no weapon system that our analysts had flagged as significantly threatening. She was by every metric our tactical database contained, a standard human infantry unit. Priority threat level 3 out of 10. Suggested engagement protocol, routine suppression, redirect to containment. Our tactical database, I would like the record to show, is going to need significant updating. I did not see Mira Solano in the early hours of the battle. I was in command vessel Sovereign Reach, monitoring the campaign with the comfortable distance of a commander who has done this many times and knows how it is supposed to go. Reports were coming in. Sectors were turning from red to orange. Orange, in our system, means contested but trending favorable. Orange was good. I liked orange. Then Sector 7 went back to red. I blinked at the display. Feroz, Baak. Sector 7. Yes, Commander. It was orange. Yes, Commander. It is now red. Also yes, Commander. I stared at him. He stared back with that expression, the one that meant he had information he did not think I was going to enjoy receiving. What happened in Sector 7? Our unit Craft 22 encountered a disruption. What kind of disruption? The humankind, sir. Here is what had happened in Sector 7, assembled from the accounts of the surviving members of Craft 22, a security unit comprised of 8 Vrothkai soldiers, equipped with standard combat plating and Trevon-class pulse weaponry. Craft 22 had been advancing through a section of structures the humans called an industrial district, which is a polite way of saying an area full of large, heavy, inconveniently shaped obstacles perfect for ambush. Their unit leader, Sub-Commander Vrothkai, had identified 2 heat signatures ahead and ordered a standard pincer approach. The 2 signatures turned out to be Sergeant Mira Solano and 1 Corporal Des Ruano, who was crouched behind a piece of industrial machinery approximately the size of a Vrothkai scout vessel and appeared from the thermal imaging to be eating something. He was in fact eating what the humans call a sandwich. This detail was included in the report and I initially thought it was an error. It was not an error. Corporal Des Ruano was eating a sandwich while a Vrothkai security unit closed in on his position. I have since been informed that this is considered, by many human soldiers, completely normal behavior. Humans are profoundly strange, and I say this with the full understanding that I am a being with 4 arms, 2 mouths, and a secondary nervous system housed in my lower torso. Vrothkai ordered the advance. Craft 22 moved in, and Mira Solano, according to the accounts of the 3 soldiers who survived the next 40 seconds, did something that none of them had been briefed to expect. She did not run. She did not take cover. She looked at 8 fully armored Vrothkai soldiers advancing on her position, and she picked up a structural support beam. Not a weapon, not anything that any intelligence assessment had flagged as dangerous. A steel beam, roughly 4 meters long, that had fallen from a damaged section of the building during the earlier bombardment. It weighed, the structural analysis team later calculated, approximately 230 kilograms. Mira Solano picked it up. With 2 arms, she held it for approximately 1 second. Our surviving soldiers reported that this 1 second was the most unsettling second of their lives, which again, given that they had been through 46 combat campaigns, is saying quite a lot. Then she swung it. I will be clinical about what happened next because I am a professional, and this is an official record, and because being clinical is the only way I can get through this section without my voice doing the thing it does when I am deeply, genuinely alarmed. The first 2 soldiers of Craft 22 were struck directly. Vrothkai combat plating is rated for pulse weapon discharge, for fragmentation ordnance, and for temperatures up to 3,000 Vrothkai thermal units. It is not rated, because why would it be, for a 230-kilogram steel beam wielded by a creature who is not supposed to be strong enough to lift a 230-kilogram steel beam? Both soldiers went down. The kinetic force was later calculated to have exceeded the rating of their armor by a factor of approximately 9. The remaining 6 members of Krath 22 did what any reasonably trained soldier does when faced with an unexpected variable. They hesitated. It was a very brief hesitation, less than 2 seconds, but in those 2 seconds Mira Solano had already let go of the beam, moved laterally, and done something that our soldiers described in their reports with a word that does not translate cleanly into Vrothkai, but comes closest to meaning suddenly she was just there. She had closed the distance between herself and the nearest armored Vrothkai soldier, in the time it took our soldiers to process what had happened to their first 2 comrades. What followed was 7 seconds of footage from the unit's helmet cameras, which I reviewed personally, and which I am choosing to describe only in summary. Mira Solano disabled 3 more members of Krath 22 using, in sequence, the structural beam again, an improvised application of the soldier's own armor plating against him, and at one point what the analysts could only characterize as purely using her hands in a way we did not think hands could be used in a combat engagement. 3 soldiers managed to disengage and retreat. She let them go. She watched them leave. Then she picked up the sandwich that Corporal Des Ruano had set down for safekeeping, handed it back to him, and they moved to their next position. The sandwich survived undamaged. I stared at the helmet camera footage for a very long time. "Feroz, Baak," I said. "Yes, Commander. Pull up everything we have on this unit. This soldier, I want a full profile." "Already compiling it, sir." "And increase Sector 7 back to priority response." There was a pause. "Sir," said Feroz Baak, "I would suggest increasing the entire campaign's response level." I looked at him, he looked at me, and in his eyes, behind the professional composure of a soldier who had served 30 years and seen many things, I saw something I had not seen in a very long time. He was scared. Not of the battle, not of the campaign, not of any of the large, obvious, quantifiable threats we had spent months preparing for. He was scared of one human woman, eating a sandwich, walking towards Sector 8. "How many of her?" I said quietly. "Do they have?" Feroz Baak pulled up the strategic overlay. Across the entire combat zone, heat signatures were moving. Hundreds, thousands, not in retreat, not in defensive formation, moving forward, through positions we had thought secured, popping up in sectors we had considered cleared, dismantling our carefully constructed advance with a kind of focused, almost cheerful aggression that our entire strategic framework had not accounted for. "Sir," said Feroz Baak, "based on current movement patterns and engagement reports." He paused. "All of them," he said. "They all seem to be her." I looked at the display, at the hundreds of orange sectors turning back to red, at the footage of Mira Solano walking away from 8 soldiers with a beam over one shoulder and a complete lack of concern about what was coming next. And for the first time in 46 campaigns I felt something I had no tactical training for. I felt the suspicion that today, Tuesday, the day of the disappointing outcome, had been named correctly after all. "Get me everything," I said. "Every piece of intelligence we have, every assessment, every file." "Yes, sir." "And Feroz Baak, Commander?" I kept my eyes on the display. "Call the fleet. Tell them we may need the reserves." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds, which for Feroz Baak was the equivalent of screaming. "All of them, sir?" he finally asked. I thought about Mira Solano, about the beam, about the sandwich. "All of them." "The reserves arrived in 4 hours." 4 hours. I want you to understand what that means in practical terms. The Vrothkai reserve fleet is not a thing you call lightly. It is not a backup plan. It is the plan you deploy when the original plan has ceased to exist in any meaningful form, and you need something large enough to remind a planet that it is, technically, still being invaded. Calling the reserves is the military equivalent of looking at a small fire in your kitchen and responding by flooding the entire continent. I called the reserves, and I will tell you honestly, with no pride left to protect, that I called them because of one woman with a sandwich. Well, her and the 473 other humans who had, in the span of roughly 3 hours, turned our carefully coordinated invasion into something that our tactical analysts were describing in their reports with phrases like unexpectedly fluid resistance and engagement parameters requiring reassessment, which are the official ways of writing "we have no idea what is happening, but it is not what we planned." Feroz Baak had not said "I told you so." He had not needed to. His entire face was saying it constantly, without pause, in a way that I found significantly more irritating than words would have been. "Let me tell you about the reserves, so you understand the scale of what I brought to this problem." The Vrothkai reserve fleet at the time of the Earth campaign consisted of 42 warships, 12 planetary suppression platforms, and approximately 80,000 ground troops held in cryostasis for exactly this kind of emergency. We had used the reserve 6 times in the history of the Dominion, once against the Moltheri Collective, who had 17 planets and a navy, once against the Graven species, who had biological weaponry capable of sterilizing an atmosphere, twice against internal rebellions that had somehow acquired antimatter charges, once against a species called the Yeth, who turned out to be deeply peaceful artists who had accidentally triggered our proximity alarms, which remains the most embarrassing deployment in our history, until now. Now we were deploying them against humans, who had no warships in the air above Earth at this point, no atmospheric defenses left functional, no communication networks still operating, and who were, by every technical measure still available to us, losing. They were losing. The numbers said so. The territory map said so. Every quantifiable metric of the campaign said that the Vrothkai Dominion was winning the invasion of Earth. And yet somehow, standing in command vessel Sovereign Reach watching those metrics, I felt profoundly like a creature who was about to make a very expensive mistake. I made the mistake anyway, because I am a professional and professionals commit to their decisions even when their secondary nervous system is filing a formal objection. The reserve drop began at local dawn, which the humans call morning, in a way that almost sounds hopeful. 80,000 soldiers hitting the surface at 47 landing zones simultaneously. I watched the deployment from the command deck with Feroz Baak at my side, and I will admit that for approximately 8 minutes it looked correct. It looked like what victory is supposed to look like. Overwhelming force meeting a stretched and battered defense, numbers doing what numbers are supposed to do. Then the reports started coming in from Landing Zone 14. Commander Drevos. The voice of Ground Captain Feroz came through the comm with a texture I had learned to associate with bad news being delivered by someone who very much did not want to be the one delivering it. We have a situation. Defined situation. Our advance unit encountered resistance at the designated clearing point. Expected. Proceed. The resistance, sir, was singular. I stopped. Singular. One individual, sir. Human female. She was waiting at the clearing point. I will pause here to note that the clearing point at Landing Zone 14 was a location our tactical computers had selected specifically because it was open ground with no cover, no significant structures, and no defensive advantage. We had picked it because there was nothing there. It was the kind of location where one person standing in it should feel very exposed and very outnumbered. She was waiting, I repeated. Yes, sir. Standing in the middle of the clearing. No cover, no visible heavy weaponry. How many troops did the advance unit consist of? A pause. 60, sir. I put down the report I was holding. One human woman was standing in an open field waiting for 60 of our soldiers. Yes, sir. And? The pause this time was longer. Long enough that I became aware of Feroz Baak very carefully examining the ceiling of the command deck with intense concentration, as if he had just discovered something fascinating up there and needed to look at it rather than at me. She had a vehicle, sir. What kind of vehicle? The humans call it a... The translation is giving me some trouble, sir. It appears to be a large agricultural machine for harvesting crops. I stared at the comm unit. She was standing in an open field, I said slowly, with 60 soldiers advancing on her, armed with a crop harvesting machine. She had modified it, sir. How modified? Significantly, sir. This is the part of the report that, when I submitted it to High Command, caused Admiral Vrendorak to read it 3 times and then sit quietly for a period of approximately 20 minutes before asking anyone to speak. I have since reconstructed what happened at Landing Zone 14 from the helmet footage, the survivor accounts, and the analysis of what was left of the advance unit's equipment. The human soldier at Landing Zone 14 was not Mira Solano. This is important because I want to be clear that the events of that morning were not the work of one exceptional individual. That would have been manageable. Exceptional individuals can be tracked, targeted, contained. The human soldier at Landing Zone 14 was Sergeant Lena Bosco, 28 years old, former construction equipment operator before the war, currently assigned to what the humans called a disruption unit, which I later learned was their charming way of describing a group of people whose entire purpose was to find creative and structurally unsound ways to ruin someone else's day. Lena Bosco had found a combine harvester in an abandoned agricultural facility 3 kilometers from the clearing point. She had spent, according to later analysis of maintenance records, approximately 18 hours the previous night modifying it. The modifications included reinforced front plating made from material she had stripped from 2 of our downed scout vehicles, a mounted pulse emitter she had extracted from a 3rd scout vehicle, and somehow integrated into the harvester's existing power system, and what our engineers later described as an improvised rotational blade assembly that should not, by any reasonable engineering standard, have worked but absolutely did. Our 60-soldier advance unit walked into an open field and was hit by an agricultural machine driven by a woman who had decided that if she was going to defend a clearing, she was going to do it with a vehicle that weighed 42 tons, and had been redesigned over a single night using parts from our own equipment. 31 of the 60 soldiers were neutralized in the first pass. The harvester was moving at what our analysts calculated as 3 times its factory standard maximum speed, which should have been mechanically impossible, and which Lena Bosco apparently achieved by removing several safety systems that the original manufacturer had included because operating without them would, under normal conditions, destroy the vehicle. She ran it until it was destroyed. Then she got out, covered in what our medical database identified as engine coolant, and what the human soldiers around her apparently found very funny, and she kept fighting. "Feroz, Baak," I said, very quietly, after watching this footage. "Commander, I need you to tell me something. If I can, sir. Is this normal for them?" There was a pause, a long one, the kind of pause that a senior officer takes when he wants to answer honestly, but honesty is going to require him to say something that sounds like losing. "Our cultural database," said Feroz Baak carefully, "has a section on human behavioral patterns under extreme stress." "And what does it say?" "It says," he replied, with the tone of someone reading a document he wishes he had read 6 months ago, "that humans demonstrate a documented phenomenon under crisis conditions where their physical and cognitive performance increases beyond standard parameters. They call it several things. One of the more common terms translates roughly as, and I apologize for this, sir, fighting spirit." I let that sit in the air of the command deck for a moment. "Fighting spirit," I repeated. "Yes, sir. We did not account for that in the campaign plan." "We did not account for that, no, sir." "Why did we not account for that?" Another pause. "Because, sir, when it was flagged in the original intelligence assessment, the analyst who wrote the report described it as, and I am quoting directly, quote, a biological quirk of limited tactical relevance, end quote. I thought about the analyst who had written that. I thought about what I would like to say to that analyst. I decided that composing those thoughts would have to wait. What else did we not account for?" Feroz Baak pulled up a secondary display. The data loaded. I looked at it. Then I looked at it again, because the first look did not seem sufficient. Across every landing zone, the pattern was the same. Our soldiers were not being defeated by organized military units with superior weapons or strategic advantages. They were being systematically, methodically, and in several cases almost creatively dismantled by individual humans who appeared to have made a personal decision that today was not the day they were going to cooperate with being invaded. Landing Zone 3. 2 humans had collapsed a highway overpass onto an entire armored column using equipment from a road maintenance vehicle. Landing Zone 20. A human had somehow gotten aboard one of our logistics transports and reprogrammed its navigation system using what our engineers later identified as a device designed for personal entertainment. Landing Zone 31. 6 humans, none of them flagged as specialists in anything, had used construction foam to seal the joints of 4 ground crushers, rendering them inoperable in under 20 minutes. Construction foam, designed for sealing gaps in building materials, used against battle vehicles rated for orbital bombardment. It had worked. "They are improvising," I said. "Constantly, sir. With whatever is available. With anything, sir. We have a report from Zone 40 that one of our units was disrupted by a human who used a street vending machine as a barricade and apparently rebuilt it into a signal jammer, while our soldiers were attempting to breach the position from the other side." I absorbed this. A vending machine. "The analysis team believes it may have originally sold beverages, sir. I made the decision at local noon. The sun was high over Earth, which our science teams had always noted was slightly brighter than Vrothkai standard, and which was not at this moment making anything feel more cheerful. I opened a channel to my full command staff. All 7 of them assembled on the command deck, looking at the strategic display, which at this point resembled less a campaign map and more a painting done by someone having a very bad experience. "I am calling a tactical pause," I said. No one spoke. In Vrothkai military culture, a tactical pause is not a neutral phrase. It is the phrase you use when you need to regroup without using the word retreat, which is a word that in the Dominion carries enough social weight to end careers. We are not retreating, I clarified because I could see what they were thinking. We are reassessing engagement parameters in light of updated battlefield intelligence. Feroz Baak made the sound again. You have something to add? I said. Only, he said carefully, that in 46 campaigns I have heard you say those exact words 6 times, and in each of the 6 cases we subsequently retreated. There was a silence on the command deck. That is not relevant to the current situation, I said. Of course, sir, because this situation is different. Naturally, sir. This is a reassessment. Absolutely, sir. I looked at the display, at the red zones spreading like something living, at the footage still coming in from the surface, where humans with improvised tools and undocumented reserves of something our entire strategic framework had no word for, were doing things to our forces that no intelligence assessment had prepared us for. And then, on the central feed, I saw her again, Mira Solano. She had made it all the way to the perimeter of Landing Zone 1, our most fortified position on the surface. 2,200 soldiers, 3 ground crushers, 2 suppression towers. She had reached it somehow, with 12 other humans, and she was standing at the edge of our outer barrier, looking at it the way that a person looks at a problem they have already decided they are going to solve. She was, I noticed, eating again. Not a sandwich this time, something in a small container. She was looking at our fortified perimeter, eating whatever was in that container, and talking to the soldier beside her in a completely relaxed posture, as if she were discussing something minor, as if the perimeter were not there, as if the 2,200 soldiers behind it were an obstacle she had mentally already moved past. Feroz Baak, I said. Commander, what does our intelligence say about human psychology, about why they fight this way? He was quiet for a moment, then he pulled up a file, not from the tactical database, from the cultural analysis archive, which I had never once consulted in 46 campaigns, because in 46 campaigns I had not needed to understand why something fought. I had only needed to understand how. There is a phrase, sir, he said. The analysts flagged it as culturally significant but tactically irrelevant. They noted it appears across hundreds of human languages in different forms. What is the phrase? He read it. I stood there in the quiet of my command deck, listening to the sounds of the battle below, watching Mira Solano finish whatever was in that container, hand it to the soldier beside her, and start walking toward the perimeter. 12 humans. Toward 2,200 soldiers. Pull the outer units back, I said. Silence. Sir, said Feroz Baak. Pull them back. I want a full strategic withdrawal to the ships. All units, now. More silence. The kind of silence that fills a room when something has been decided that cannot be undecided. Sir, said my second-in-command, Ground Marshal Phelan Kaur, speaking for the first time in the entire briefing, we still have numerical superiority. We still have the suppression platforms. We can still win this campaign if we commit to a Phelan Kaur, I said. He stopped. Look at the display, I said. Tell me what you see. He looked at the display. He was quiet for a long moment. I see, he said slowly, significant resistance across multiple sectors. You see 800 soldiers who cannot be stopped by our standard protocols, I said. You see an enemy that becomes more effective the worse the situation gets. You see a species that looks at a 200-ton fortified perimeter and walks toward it because somebody told them once that walking away was worse than what comes next. I picked up my command tablet, pulled up the file, read the phrase again. You know what the phrase is, I said. The one the analysts called tactically irrelevant? No one spoke. Not on my watch, I said. That is the phrase. In every language, every culture, across this entire species. Not on my watch. It does not mean anything tactical. It does not describe a strategy or a weapon system. It is not a battlefield advantage by any metric we use. I closed the file, and it just cost us 642 soldiers, 12 ground crushers, 43 scout vehicles, 1 logistics transport and whatever was in that vending machine. I set the tablet down. Get me a withdrawal vector. All forces. We are leaving Earth. This time, nobody argued. I submitted my after-action report to High Command 14 days after the withdrawal. It was 47 pages long, which is twice the standard length for a failed campaign report, and which Admiral Vrothkai read in its entirety without commenting until the final page. On the final page I had written one recommendation. A single line. No tactical analysis. No projected resource requirements. No strategic alternatives. The line read, "Do not go back." Vrothkai called me personally after reading it. "Drevos," he said, 46 campaigns. "You have never submitted a one-line recommendation." "I have never needed to, sir." A pause. "The analysts are saying we can revise the strategy. New approach vectors, different suppression methods." "With respect, sir," I said, "the analysts are the same people who described fighting spirit as a biological quirk of limited tactical relevance." Another pause. Longer. "Point taken," said Vrothkai. "I am told that Mira Solano was later promoted, that Lena Bosco received some kind of honor for the Harvester incident, which I understand is a story that is told among human soldiers now with a great deal of enthusiasm and probably some exaggeration, though based on the footage I reviewed I am not entirely sure what there is left to exaggerate. I am told that after the withdrawal, the humans put up something at Landing Zone 14, a monument of sorts. Our intelligence satellite got an image of it before we redirected it to more useful surveillance. It was a harvester, the same one, or what was left of it, mounted on a platform, with a small sign beneath it. We had the sign translated. It took 3 passes because our translation software kept flagging the language as too informal for an official monument. The sign said, "She drove it until it stopped. Then she kept going." I have thought about that sign many times since the withdrawal. I have thought about Mira Solano walking toward a fortified perimeter with 12 soldiers at her back and nothing but that phrase and whatever was in that small container sustaining her. I have thought about what kind of species builds a monument to a broken machine and considers it a celebration, and I have concluded, after significant reflection, in my official capacity as Supreme Field Commander of the Vrothkai Dominion, 3rd son of the High Warlord, decorated survivor of 46 campaigns, the 47th of which I will not be discussing at dinner parties, we were not ready for them. We were not ready for any of them. And the most frightening thing, the thought that keeps me company on long nights in a way that 46 previous campaigns never managed, is this: they knew it. They knew it the whole time.